All right, good morning. Good morning for most of you. It's 11 o'clock Central Time here, so we're going to jump in to our webinar today on reducing the risks of change orders and additional costs on your next paving project. So we are excited that you're here today to spend the next hour with us. So before we kick things off, we just want to go through a couple of housekeeping items here first this morning. PDHs are available and those certificates will be emailed out to you post webinar today. So look for an email from the Benchmark team following our webinar today. We do have a series of 3 poll questions. So we do hope that you'll participate in those poll questions today because we will be elaborating on some of them as we work through the presentation. You do have the opportunity to submit questions. We will not take questions during the presentation, but we will do questions and answers at the end of the session today. So if you have any questions, please submit those via the Q&A icon. And we have a team of people that are tracking those questions for us and will get them over to us so that we can address them. And lastly, we will have a recording available of the session today. So if you are not able to stay on for the entire session or you want to go back and watch it or share it with someone within your organization, we certainly encourage you to do that. So I just wanted to take a chance to introduce myself and Troy, our presenters. So I'm Elise Schmidt with Benchmark. I've been with Benchmark for 17 years and I am the general manager of our pavement division. And my co-host today is Troy Kaiser. And Troy has been in the paving industry for over 35 years and is a senior consultant at Benchmark. And he's super lucky because he gets to work side by side with me every day. Right, Troy?
Yep. Good morning, everybody.
So we're super excited that you guys are here today. And so just a little bit about Benchmark, in case you're not familiar with us. We are a national roof and pavement consulting firm. We do provide services throughout the United States, and with our main goal to be able to objectively and provide technically sound consulting services to help you reduce risk and manage both your roof and your pavement assets. So a little bit more about Benchmark. We were established in 1983. We are independently, privately owned corporation, and we provide 4 main services: evaluation and analysis, design bid services, construction phase services, which is construction oversight, and program management. So helping you to manage your fleets of roof and pavement assets. We have 2 offices, one in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, that's our corporate office. And then Troy and I both work out of our Waukesha, Wisconsin office. We also have 21 satellite locations throughout the United States, which helps us to be able to service our clients all throughout the United States. And currently we have 117 team members on Benchmark. This is just a slide to show you where we work, just so you can see the yellow are our roofing projects, green are our pavement. So just a high-level overview of all of the different areas where we work from coast to coast. So what are our objectives today? We have 3 main objectives. We hope that you will learn something. We hope that we can help you to understand, and also we want to share. So we want you to learn how to reduce change orders and control costs. So what are some of the upfront things that you can do to plan and prep? We want to help you understand that unforeseen work items do come up, and how do you justify those costs? How do you make sure that it's good pricing and that it's really what's in your best interest? And then we're going to share with you some real world examples of change orders and how they were addressed in the field. So with that, we're going to jump into poll question number 1 of 3 today here. So poll question number 1, have you ever had a change order request that pushed your project over budget? So we want to hear from you. So let us know yes or no. Have you ever experienced a change order that has pushed your project over budget? So we'll give just a couple of seconds here for all of those poll questions to come in, and then we will close the poll question and share with you those results. All right, so it looks like 92% of our participants today have had a change order request that has put their project over budget. So you were at the right place, and hopefully Troy and I will be able to share with you some insights. And we had about 8% that said they have not. So those 8%, we might need to talk after this because maybe you have some tips and tricks to share with us as well. All right, so with that, we are going to jump in. So nothing can be more frustrating than unexpected and unforeseen costs. No one likes to go to their boss. 92% of you said you've had projects that change orders that have put your project over budget. And I know I don't like to go request additional funds, and I know you probably don't like to go request additional funds. So what I'm going to share with you today is I'm going to share with you basically 7 steps that you can take to help you plan and reduce the risk of change orders. It's not a guarantee that you're not going to have a change order. Unforeseen things happen all the time in construction, but we do feel like there are 7 steps you can take to definitely help you overall reduce the risk of change orders. So the first step is geotechnical exploration. So understanding the existing pavement system, it's key to a pavement project. It allows you to be able to design the project based on facts and not assumptions, and which allows you to have a more accurate design. So a lot of times geotechnical exploration, there's a cost to it. And sometimes that cost, most of the time it's happening at the time that you're working through your design or your project prep, and you might not even have the capital money yet to do the project. But it's definitely a good investment and something that will help you to reduce the risk of change orders for your projects. So item number 2 is a detailed survey. So when we talk about surveying, we would be talking about things like drainage, making sure that you're surveying the drainage and you know what repairs need to be done to correct any drainage at the site, any ADA to make sure that your ADA areas will be within ADA compliance, and then other site or project particulars. So every site is unique, and that's why we specify or suggest site-specific design. Because there is no design that fits every site out there.
Elise, a good example of why it's important to have a survey done to know the grades of your parking lot and know that the water drains is, I've seen it more than once where the contractor will start the project, especially with overlays, and they'll get to a spot where they don't think the drainage is going to work or it's going to be tight, and they go to the owner looking for a change order to correct those drainage areas. Or worse, they ask for the owner to sign off that if there's a puddle in that area or it doesn't drain properly, that the contractor is not responsible. So that's why it's really important to make sure that the drainage works on the site before you start your paving project.
Yeah, great points, Troy. Thank you. So step number 3 is detailed plans and specifications. So we talked about geotech, we talked about survey. Both of those play into being able for you to develop detailed site-specific plans and specifications. So what are the benefits of detailed plans and specifications? Well, it's going to assure that all of your work items are included in your contractor's bids that you receive. It's also going to ensure that there's no questions on the expectations. What are the expectations of the project? And it also closes the loopholes for potential extras. So taking the geotech, the survey data to develop the detailed plans and specifications is definitely a critical step in helping to reduce the risk of change orders. So step number 4 is unit price bidding. And you'll see here on the screen, we have a sample unit price bid form. This is a project that we worked on this year. So what are the benefits of unit price bidding, or why would they help reduce the risk of change orders? Well, for one, you're only paying for the quantities that are installed. So no one wants to pay for something they're not getting, right? So you're going to pay for just the quantities that are installed. And it also reduces the risk of what we would kind of call potential fluff that might be seen in a lump sum bid. And so sometimes lump sum bids, there can be some assumptions. Maybe there's not the detailed plan and specification. So the contractor's making assumptions. Therefore, there's some fluff in the bid that you really can't justify, or you may not even know that it's in there. So if or when a change order occurs, having unit price bidding is key to making sure that most of the time you have those numbers up front and can help justify them in the field. And it also avoids any kind of price creep that might come up when a change order. Sometimes you're under the gun, you got to get a change order approved, contractors got to put something together right away. And so they're just going to throw a number at it. So having unit prices can help that if you do get a change order, it can help you to better plan for that change order in the field.
Yeah, it's always best to get those prices for those contingency items when the contractor is trying to get the work. You're always going to get more competitive pricing for undercutting or base patching. So unit pricing is definitely the way to go.
Troy must have known what my next slide was, because it's about contingency items and how they play into unit pricing. So I appreciate that, Troy. You know, we saw in the previous slide the unit price bid form, and bidding that way does allow you, as Troy said, to have contingency items. Sometimes they'll be called allowances. So you may have an item like utility locating. Or utility repairs, excuse me. You may not know what type of repairs are going to be needed, but including an allowance in the bid is one less change order that the contractor has to come back to you for during the project. And Troy also mentioned stone undercut. So those are big items that would be seen as contingency or allowance items. And the biggest reason to have those is it eliminates project delays. So if a change order comes up, you've got that pricing already. You can be having conversations with the contractor, having conversations with your boss on what those additional costs might be. Basically, you've got everything you need right there at your fingertips. So poll question number 2. So give a second here for it to pop up. So question number 2. What % of the project cost do you typically budget for project contingencies and unforeseen work scope? So I'm just curious, on a project that you might do you allow for any sort of project contingencies or unforeseen work scope? And then Troy will actually share with you kind of what we include. There's no right or wrong. We're just curious on what you may include. So we'll give just a couple of seconds here for those answers to come in, and then we will share the poll results with you. All right, looks like the results are in, and look at this. I don't know if all of our attendees are from the same company. Actually, I know they're not, but let's see. So 94% of you said 10% project contingencies, and 6% said 5% project contingencies. So I would say that's very much in line with what Benchmark would typically do on a project. And Troy, I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more on this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're usually around 5 to 10% in general. We use the borings to help us determine what kind of contingencies we want to have included. If we suspect that what's underneath the existing pavement is going to be soft, we'll add a lot more contingency to cover what we would expect for overruns. And obviously, the bigger the project, the percentage of contingencies has a tendency to go down. And the smaller the project, that percentage will go up, because you have some fixed costs there that are not going to fluctuate.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for participating in the poll question. And we will keep moving here. So step number 6 is construction oversight and inspection. So on-site personnel, having on-site personnel, someone that's managing your project for you, can really assure that you're getting what you pay for, and can be tying that back to that unit price that we talked about, or those quantities of bid that we talked about in that unit price bid form. So it allows your eyes on the project to also have an understanding of what's going on, to be able to help you justify, is the additional work that's being requested necessary, or are there other options potentially? And having construction oversight or inspection, it also allows you to be able to track and control the quantities of additional work. So if there are things that are coming up, you can have somebody tracking that. And Troy's actually one of his examples he's going to share with us this morning. He'll touch on that a little bit more. And so one last step in helping to reduce the risk of change orders is quality contractors. And so when we talk about quality contractors, we think about the pre-qualification process. And I'm sure everybody has a different way of pre-qualifying contractors. At Benchmark, we actually have a pre-qualification form that we send to contractors. It's about 3 pages. It helps us to understand what the capacity is of that contractor, what type of work scope they typically do, what work they would do in-house versus subcontracting out. It also helps us to understand what equipment they might have, how many crews they might have, because there is such a varying level of complexity to different types of paving projects. You can have a pretty simple overlay project, and then you may have a more in-depth, full-depth reconstruction project. And so you want to make sure that the contractors that are bidding on your project are qualified to do the scope of work that's actually being bid. And also quality contractors, it allows you to have a comprehensive bid preparation. And so when we talk about that, things we think of are contractors who are committed to asking questions, contractors that are willing to review the plans and specifications, attend on-site pre-bid meetings. That is critical. Basically making sure that the contractors that are bidding on your projects are willing to do the homework that's needed to ensure that they understand the project scope. So to summarize what I shared with you this morning, reducing the risks of change orders, there's 7 steps we feel you can take to be proactive in the process. And those 7 steps are geotechnical exploration, site surveying, putting together detailed plans and specifications, utilizing unit price bidding. And one thing I want to mention about unit price bidding that I forgot to mention before is we understand we actually have some clients that their bidding systems don't allow for unit price bidding, and that's okay. You could always put together a lump sum bid and then ask the low bidder when before you award the project to complete the unit price bid form, so you still have those unit costs going into construction. So there is a workaround there if you need to bid things through your e-bidding system lump sum. You can always back into that unit price too to make sure you're getting a fair price. And then along with unit price bidding is allowing for those contingency items or allowances in the project. And then oversight and inspection, having somebody that's on site, that's managing the project, that understands what's going on, and then making sure that you have quality contractors that you're working with, that you're asking to bid your projects. So with that, we are going to actually jump into poll question number 3, and then I'm going to hand it off to Troy here.
All right, thanks, Elise. Poll question number 3. How do you determine if change order pricing is reasonable? And we've got a multiple choice here for you to choose from. Compare it to the original bid, use unit price bidding with contingencies, call a second contractor for a price to compare, consult with coworkers that you know that may have experience in the field or prior construction projects, verify with your pavement consultant, or the last one is none of the above.
We'll give you a couple of seconds here to get your feedback in, and then we will close the poll and share the results with you.
All righty, and looks like I'll go down through the percentages here. Compare it to the original bid, 33% of you chose that. Use unit price bidding with contingencies, 33% of you chose that one. Call a second contractor, 7%. Consult with coworkers, 7%. Verify with the pavement consultant, 53%. And none of the above, 7%. This was kind of a trick question because any one of those options other than none of the above would be acceptable. Anything that you can do to make sure that the pricing you're getting for any additional work is comparable to the original bid, you should go ahead and use those techniques to come up with that answer. And so when we get into some of the examples here, I think you'll see how we can do that. Okay, now that you've gone through the 7 steps that Elise outlined, and you still get a change order request or a quantity increase, what should you do? So I've got some tips for how you can handle when that happens. Number 1, don't be pressured by the contractor or the schedule to make a quick decision. Do your due diligence, make sure that you're making the right decision. So even if there's bad weather in the forecast, don't buckle to that pressure to push forward and make a wrong decision. Number 2, assure that the work is justified and what you're paying for it, it's worth it. Got a couple of examples here. On the left was a project we did in the St. Louis area, and that is not after a rainstorm. We got the project excavated, and there's a large parking field right next to this, and water just started pouring from underneath that pavement into the cut area. We suspect that there were springs on the site. When we checked with the owner, he confirmed that they also were thinking there were springs on the site. So we did approve an additional work order for the contractor to install under drain that connected to a catch basin to get this water away from the pavement structure so that the owner was getting what they were paying for and that it would last as long as they were expecting. The example on the right here is actually a concrete parking lot that was in California. And once we removed the concrete, that we realized there was no stone underneath it at all. And we did have a contingency set up. So we were able to justify spending that contingency money to excavate this dirt and supply a proper stone base for the new concrete pavement. And then we talked about, is the pricing in line with the original bid? If you're not using unit pricing, a real quick way to determine is to take the cost of your project and divide it by the square yards. So you come up with kind of a rough square yard price for what rehabilitating the parking lot is costing. And you can compare that to the square yards of the change order and what the contractor is charging you. Here's a case where it was at a shopping mall. Our consultant on site determined that from a test roll with a loaded dump truck, that there was an area that was too soft to pave on, that the pavement won't last. So we had contingencies in place. So we knew up front that what it was going to cost to excavate the area, haul that dirt away, install a subgrade fabric and a new stone base and fine grading it before we ever knew that we were going to have to do that. And because we had that pricing up front, our consultant was able to measure the area and tell the owner, hey, we're going to have a little bit of an extra here. This is exactly what it's going to cost. And we had the contingency set up. So it ended up not being a big problem. So make sure that it's the pricing's in line with the original bid amounts. And number 4, be open to alternatives. Just because the contractor comes to you with a solution to a problem that came up, explore other options. Maybe there's a better, more cost-effective way to do it. And where we typically see that is on large parking lots or roadways, when you remove the pavement and all of a sudden it's not just a small isolated area like we showed in the previous example. The whole area maybe needs to be stabilized and it's just not cost-effective to dig it out. Well, we can either do in the 2 examples here, like a fly ash or a cement stabilization, where we can add materials to the existing stone or subgrade, mix it in, compact it, harden it up, and have a surface that we can pave on top of that will last a long time without having the expense of hauling material away and hauling new stone base in. So be open to alternatives, ask questions, ask your contractor, okay, you said to do it this way. How else can we solve the problem that might be a little, thicken up the asphalt and use less stone? There are alternatives, and just be aware that it doesn't hurt to ask questions.
Yeah, and Troy, a live example that I just dealt with a couple of weeks ago was a project that we were doing partial depth reconstruction on, and it was a large parking lot. And we did do borings on the site and had a good feel for what we were getting into, but the asphalt was actually thicker in some areas than what the boring showed. And so the contractor was thinking that they were going to need quite a bit of stone undercut with what they were seeing, but because they were milling the project, we were able to actually work with them to utilize some of the existing millings along with some of the stone that was already in the original design, so we were able to recycle some product and also not have to pay for that extra stone. So there definitely are lots of alternatives out there.
Yeah, that's a great example. So in summary, if you do end up with a change order or an increase in quantities, don't be pressured to make an immediate decision. Make sure the work is justified and necessary. Make sure your pricing is fair, and be open to alternatives and explore those alternatives. Okay, now we'll get into real world examples. And the first real world example I call is between a rock and a hard place. This is a medium-sized parking lot in the Midwest that we were involved in. It's a full reconstruction because the parking lot sloped toward the building and the owner wanted to reduce the slope to help keep water from heading toward the building, but also in the wintertime to keep vehicles from sliding off the parking lot. It was quite steep. We did borings, several borings. So we knew there was bedrock in the area. The owner actually knew there was bedrock from when they built the building originally back in the 60s. And our borings are just a snapshot. So they showed that the bedrock was about 2 feet down. So we were hoping that we would be able to get the project done without encountering the bedrock. And the owner, but the owner did put in a lump sum contingency to cover any rock excavation just in case we did hit it. So of course, when we started doing the full excavation, we did hit the bedrock right in the middle of the parking lot. It was approximately 200 by 200 foot area. It was about 8 inches too high. Normally for rock removal, you would blast the rock like they do in a quarry and haul the material away. But because we had the existing building there and it was in a residential area, that really wasn't an option. So that we asked the contractor for a price to remove the rock after we shot grades and determined what the quantity would be. And that came in at $24,000. And that entailed them bringing in a breaker that mounts on the excavator, which you can see here in the photograph. And the process was to use the breaker to break up the bedrock like you would a concrete slab that you're going to remove, and then switch the bucket out of the excavator and then load it into trucks. So the consultant on site was very experienced in construction, had a construction background, and thought that the price was kind of high. So suggested that the contractor supply us with hourly costs for each piece of equipment and the mobilization to bring the breaker on site, and also what it was going to cost per hour for the dump trucks and the dump fee to dump the rock at the local quarry. The contractor agreed to do the work by time and material or time and dump fees. And so the inspector stayed on site during the whole rock removal, logged the hours that were spent breaking the material, logged the hours that were spent dozing it into piles and then loading it with the excavator, and kept track of the amount of loads that were hauled away. And as you can see, they got the bedrock removed. The project turned out really nice. I'm really proud of how the project turned out. And the final cost to remove the bedrock was only $6,425 doing it time and material, for a total savings of $17,575. So made a good decision here for a potential extra, and got that cost down. So the owner was happy and we were happy as well.
So Troy, $17,500, that's quite a savings on a change order. So I'm just curious, from the contractor's perspective, was their original price so high just because of the unknowns? Did they not really understand what they were getting into, or felt like their backs were up against a wall in terms of, hey, we got to get a price over, so we're just gonna throw a price on this? Because it appears based on this example that they were willing to go time and material. So can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Yeah, they were very willing to go time and material. Anytime they can do work where they know they're going to get paid for everything they do, just like with unit pricing. I think it was a quality contractor. We didn't think they were trying to gouge the customer at all. I think they just had never done this process. Normally you hire a subcontractor to come in and do blasting. It's a very technical type of work. And so I think they were just really unsure how long it was going to take, and they wanted to make sure that they didn't go over on costs. So they were very willing to go with time and material, and they were happy as well. They got paid for the additional work they did. They made a little bit of profit on it, I'm sure, but none of the prices were out of line. And so it just was a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next example is what I call the change order happy contractor. This is a project, an industrial roadway that we were involved in down in the Chicago area. It was full depth reconstruction, had to dig it right down to subgrade and rebuild it from the bottom up. A lot of small details because it was through a industrial site with a lot of piping and utilities. And the owner did ask for a lot of changes and improvements during the project. So unfortunately, the contractor did not request any change orders till the project was finished. So it was kind of a shock when the final bill came with all these change orders. There were actually 15 requests. 3 were approved right away because they were things that the owner asked for and wanted. 1 was covered under another contract. I believe it was patching of a utility that was installed. And 11 of them were rejected. And the reason for those rejections were, when we looked at each individual change order, 8 of them were for work that were already included in the original bidding documents. So there was no way that the owner needed to pay for those because they should have been included in the contractor's original bid. 2 of them were done without prior approval or direction by the owner. And it was work that just wasn't justified or needed. So they were rejected on those grounds. And 1 was overpriced and was rejected, and the contractor resubmitted it, and then it was approved.
So Troy, we talked before about the benefits of detailed plans and specifications. So I'm curious, there were 8 of them that were rejected because work was included in the bid documents. Can you share any examples with us of what those might have been?
I believe one of them was when they installed some new curb and gutter in an area where we were raising the grade and doing an overlay. When the new curb and gutter went in, it was poured in at a higher elevation. And the patching between the new curb and gutter and the existing roadway, they tried to charge the owner for that. And it was clearly stated in the bid that any patching of that binder was the contractor's responsibility and was incidental to the installation of the curb and gutter. And I believe one of the other ones was for some additional patching on some under drain work that went in, and that was also incidental to the lineal foot unit price for the under drain. So they were just trying to double bill the owner, and I don't think the contractor was trying to pull the wool over the owner's eyes. I just think they didn't look at the plans real closely and weren't aware that those items were covered under the original bid.
Sure, especially because they were incidental, but just goes to show the importance of everybody that's working on the project being familiar with the plans and specifications and what's included.
Absolutely. This particular example I call the rip-rap rip-off, which Elise thinks is really a funny name. This is a really nice, large semi-trailer parking project that we were fortunate enough to be involved in Ohio. Project turned out really nice. As you can see here, it was quite extensive, and but there was an item for riprap installation. And the unit price for riprap installation was for installing riprap at the areas where the water came off these large paving fields. So we knew it would be coming off and at a pretty good velocity, and we didn't want it eroding. So the price included excavating the area approximately 8 to 12 inches, installing a fabric, and then installing this large riprap stone over the top of the fabric to prevent erosion. Well, the owner really liked the look of the riprap, and they had these large landscape areas, and they thought rather than having to mow these areas, they would install this riprap and cover the area up, and then they'd only have to spray like weed killer to kill any weeds that came up in between. And the contractor agreed to do the riprap at the unit price. But when we looked at the unit price, the scope change was so, the scope had changed so much that, went from 6 to 8 small areas where the riprap was going to be installed to them installing tons and tons of it over large areas. We knew they were going to get a lot better production. It would go a lot faster. They'd install more tons per hour than they originally bid it. So our recommendation to the owner was, hey, renegotiate that unit price. We would do the same thing if we had a very large quantity and it got cut down. We would also recommend that the contractor be paid, more for a lesser quantity, because obviously they wouldn't cover their costs for that quantity being reduced. So that was our recommendation, was to renegotiate the bid price. Okay, the last example I call the lazy contractor. This is a medium-sized manufacturing facility. It had a roadway coming in, and the design called for the new roadway to be built over the top of the old roadway and use that old roadway for a good base because it was getting truck traffic. As you can see, the grades were raised, and by raising the grades, there's quite a drop off from the new roadway down to the existing turf. And so there was quite an extensive increase in the amount of topsoil and landscaping that needed to be done. So a change order was requested by the contractor for that additional quantities of work. So what the contractor did was they measured the length of the roadway, took an arbitrary width of the landscape and an arbitrary depth of what the topsoil they put in. Well, what our consultant on site did was he actually field measured this. It took the time to field measure the area of new topsoil and landscaping, and then shot grades of the new profile. We had shot grades before the project started, so we had the difference in elevation, and actually did a very accurate estimate of how much extra topsoil was hauled into this site, and had a dead-on extra for the amount of landscaping that was done. And it turned out to be quite a bit less than what the contractor had done. And because the consultant on site took that time, it saved the owner a considerable amount of money. I don't have those exact quantities for this project, but in talking with our consultant that was on site, he said it was well worth the effort to do that measuring and shoot those grades to come up with an accurate quantity change.
Sometimes it's just good to ask some questions and do some due diligence before approving anything.
So in summary, consider the 7 steps outlined by Elise to reduce your change orders: geotechnical exploration, the site survey. Definitely have detailed plans and specs so the contractors can't miss anything. Use unit price bidding and contingency items for for potential item overruns that are needed. Have oversight and inspection. It doesn't how good a set of plans and specs you have. If the contractor doesn't follow them, you're not going to get the life out of your pavement. And use quality contractors that are always going to do a good job preparing the bids, aren't going to miss anything in their bids, and aren't going to be looking for extra work that's unjustified. And then when faced with a change order, ask questions and make sure you do your due diligence to make sure to either approve them or have reasons to reject them. And don't make rush decisions without all the facts.
All right. Well, we are going to jump into some questions and answers here. So I'm going to leave it on the screen that shows Troy and I's contact information. We certainly encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions or feedback. But we do have a couple of questions that have been submitted so far. So I'm going to grab those questions here and read them as they're coming in. And then if you have any other questions that you want to submit, please go ahead and get those submitted. So Troy, the first question is, what can be done to avoid a change order from a contractor that hits an underground utility such as a light pole conduit?
That's a good question. You definitely want to make sure you include hotlining or locating of all public and private utilities. It's almost guaranteed the contractor is doing any excavation, they're going to call the one call service. In Wisconsin here, it's called Diggers Hotline, to make sure that they aren't going to hit any power lines or gas lines or communication lines, which can be really expensive if they're fiber optics that are coming onto the site. But it's also very important to hire a private firm to mark out any private lines that the owner has that go to light poles or even communication lines between buildings that can shut the owner's business down. And it's just a good safety thing to do that. And once those are located, that's going to reduce the cost of any change orders. If the contractor is not careful and he hits those lines, it's going to be all on him, and he certainly can't come back to you for fixing your private lines if he already knew they were there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Another question, Troy. How do you know when to use time and material?
That's a good question. I think the best time to use time and material would be like in that example with the rock removal, when you're really unsure how long something's going to take. We're pretty good at estimating how long it takes to excavate a dirt area, to install a stone base. We calculate the tonnage that will cover an area at a certain thickness. And, we know how long it takes for a contractor to install a certain amount of tons on average, and the same thing for paving. But when you've got an item like that rock removal where there's just so many unknowns, it's just fair to everybody to do it time and material, as long as the contractor doesn't drag his feet. You want those contractors, make sure they're moving along and not wasting your time and your money.
All right, so another question, and if you have any other questions, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A. So another question, Troy, that came in is, how can additional stone or asphalt pricing be verified? So when a change order pops up in the field, how can you verify the stone or asphalt pricing?
Well, like I mentioned during one of our slides, you can take the original bid price if it's a lump sum and divide by the square yards, and you'll come up with kind of a rough square yard cost for your project. I would hope that any additional work would be less than that. Just calculating the square yards and the tonnage that goes in that area. Ask your contractor, or what you can do is, if you've got a lump sum bid, go to your contractor and ask them, okay, for your lump sum bid, what was the cost per square yard and what was the cost per ton for the paving? They should not be afraid to share that information with you if they're not they shouldn't have anything to hide. And then if they give you a lump sum change order, ask them for the same information. Ask them how many tons and how many square yards is this? So then you can do that comparison by dividing that into the square yards of the area and come up with a comparison unit price. So don't be afraid to ask those kind of questions of your contractor. If you've done your vetting of the contractor, he'll be willing to work with you and supply that information.
Awesome, thank you. All right, are there any other questions that you guys have today? If so, please go ahead and submit them via the Q&A. And we will address them. Otherwise, we can sign off for the day. Let me see here. I think, let's see if there's any other questions coming in. All right, so I don't think there's any other questions coming in. So we certainly appreciate your time today. We hope that you learned something. We hope today's webinar was insightful, and we value your feedback. So if you have questions or feedback for Troy or I or the Benchmark team, we like to hear good feedback, but we also like to hear constructive feedback and know how we can improve for next time. So with that, we will sign off for the day. Have a great day and have a good weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.